So, Babajide, welcome to our conversation here.
Thank you very much.
How was the AGM 2017 of the Afrexim Bank?
Well, I think it has been excellent so far. I think we've had a number of very important, very useful and very timely conversations. And I'm looking forward to the kind of outcomes that we can take forward at the end of the meeting. But my overall impression has been that the meeting has been well organized, the discussions have been very engaging and very insightful, and I think it has been an excellent meeting.
No, some of the things that were discussed in the sessions
Yes.
are not new. We've had this before. And literally much of what we talked about is what we hear in other conversations.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you were part of the conversation earlier on the panel.
Yes.
What is different now?
Well, you know what, I think, first of all, the context, right? To the extent that we have challenges that remain constant, then it means, and to the extent that we have not yet been able to not just devise solutions, but implement solutions that effectively resolve those challenges, then it means that the conversations have to be ongoing, right? Because the worst situation will be if you ignore a problem and you stop attempting to engage and to deal and to resolve the problem. So first of all, these issues, yes, we've been talking about it, but they are so important, they are so critical, they are such a core component of what we want to be as a continent, of what we want to be as countries, that we cannot stop talking about it. But in terms of what is different, I'd say that the urgency, right, of developing useful, practical solutions for these challenges have never been greater. And of course, we're talking about the need to boost intra-Africa trade, to increase trade and investment among Africans. It is clear that with what is going on in the world now, Africa really can no longer rely on third-party people for its development, for its economic transformation, and that as such, Africa's journey is primary and its destiny is in the hands of Africans. And
you know, I understand what you're saying, but let's talk about real things.
All right.
It took Rwanda really a great deal to convince neighboring countries that fellow citizens or within the neighborhoods can cross the borders without a passport. It took a lot of effort. Now, what I want to find out, you come from the African Union.
Yes.
This conversation that we are having today, does it talk about making it easy? Or you talk about policies, processes, and number of principles?
Okay. So I'll say that it's beyond that. It's beyond policies, it's beyond principles. It's also about decisions, right? And decisions that are implemented. Sometimes implemented slowly, but implemented nonetheless. There was an AU decision, I think, last year about countries, more African countries, beginning to at least, like what Rwanda is doing, to start granting visa on arrival to other African countries. And you find a number of countries that have announced their implementation of that particular decision over the past few years. Of course, different countries have different regulatory contexts, they have different regulatory frameworks. And for some countries it might be easier, right, to implement, while some that it might take longer. But I think we have to look at it from the view of incremental progress. I can assure you that if you look at things like the visa restrictiveness index, that the performance when it comes to movement of persons has actually improved in the last few years. Again, arising from the renewed political commitment towards the ideals of having a united Africa, an Africa where people can move and all that. Now, I can't talk about that without talking about the significant decision about the African Union passports, which at the moment in its initial phase, the idea was that, okay, while we streamline our laws and our immigration protocols and issues, let us start at least by granting this African Union passport to as many of our leaders as possible, political leaders, business leaders, thought leaders, to begin to popularize it. Not that that is the fulfillment of the vision, but you can almost look at it as almost like a small deposit, right? Or a small step towards the eventual goal. So, and you have 55 countries, 55 African Union member states. It is, you know how much you yourself said time and energy it took to convince the 5 members of the East African community. And even with that, you know, progress was uneven. Imagine that among 55 countries that are not even neighbors, culturally different.
I know.
These things take time.
One of the things that you discussed, like actually this was like the highlight of the summit here, transformation.
Yes.
Transforming Africa. I mean, we're talking about getting rid of poverty.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Now, it's not because Africa is poor.
Yeah.
We have resources, we have raw materials, we have everything. But people need to improve their household incomes.
Yes.
You have a bank here that has billions of dollars that is willing to cash out for people who are doing business and creating employment, industrialization, and all that kind of manufacturing. The question is, what do we need? We have had this problem for ages. What do we need?
Well,
what's the problem?
You know what? One will say that the solution is known, right? So the fact that you know that, okay, if I have to, the problem is that I want to get to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. The solution is easy, right? Just climb. But when it comes to implementing it, it's not easy. Implementation has always been our challenge, right? The fact that this, they are just.
Why do we fail to implement something we already know?
Not so much in terms of failure to implement. It's just that sometimes these are just really challenging things to do, and then again I will prefer to see things from incremental progress. Look at Rwanda, right? The beautiful country. Anyone that looks at the story of Rwanda must admit that progress is possible. Right? It might take time, it might take a lot of sacrifices, but if you look at where the country is coming from and where the country is now, you know that yes, there is demonstrable evidence that African countries can get it.
Don't be politically correct. What is the biggest problem we have here within our community? I mean, the continent. What's the problem? Why is it hard? Why is it hard for one country to trade with another one? Why do they fear doing trade between each other? Why do they lock down everything?
Well, I'll do the things that most political people do: blame other people for the problems, and essentially, I think part of it is that you, as much as yes, we are accountable for our own country, we have to take responsibility, but we must admit that the artificial barriers and the artificial borders that was created by colonialism, this is something that we are still resolving. This is something that we are still dealing with. In every country in Africa, you will find communities, tribes that were essentially split by artificial borders. That is what, with the African Union, that is what we are trying to achieve now. That is what we are trying to erase. Because if you were to think about it, beyond, there are more barriers, more boundaries within Africa now than there were, say, 100 years ago or 150 years ago. So it was an unnatural situation, which it just takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of commitment to get there. But I think we must not fail to appreciate that there is an important thing that has been done, or there's an important thing that at least we can count on, and that is the political will to face these challenges, the political will to address it and do something.
We should end this now.
Yeah.
What lesson?
Generally
from this.
No,
Just briefly. What have you learned from the discussion?
I think the most important thing I think is that because what strikes me is that sometimes the private sector, they are talking to themselves, the policymakers are talking to themselves, and they're all talking about the same problems, using different words, different languages, and that's really for progress. we need to start talking to each other.
Okay.
Because it's not just about the government, it's not just about the private sector. The government makes the policies, but then the policies are meant to be for the benefit of the private sector. And I will admit, as a policymaker, that sometimes we get caught up in our own rooms and our own enclaves, you know, talking theory, this should be good for them, this should be good, bad for them.
But now it's open.
It should be more open. Okay. And I think that is the progressive, positive lesson that I'll take from here, that we need to engage more with our stakeholders, especially our private sector stakeholders. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.